State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. There's a lot to cover from a busy week in the legislative session. But first, let's review the big news on the election front. Voters in Alabama's newly redrawn 2nd Congressional District have chosen their nominees for the general election. In the Republican primary runoff, it was political newcomer Caroline Dobson defeating former state Senator Dick Brubaker 58% to 42%. She'll be the GOP nominee on the November ballot. In the Democratic primary runoff, it was former Department of Justice official Shamari Figures defeating State Representative Anthony Daniels 61% to 39%, and he'll be the Democratic nominee. This sets up an interesting race in November that will be the first truly competitive general election for Congress since probably 2010. One interesting thing to note is the vote total. Back in the March 5th primary, about the same number of Republican voters turned out than Democratic voters. In this runoff, Democrats outpaced Republicans by more than 10,000 votes. That's interesting because voter enthusiasm and turnout are likely to be big factors in the general election. Back here to the State House, where the Alabama Legislature met this week for the 22nd and 23rd legislative days. That leaves us with 7 more possible days remaining that will be spread out over the next 3 weeks. We'll start our coverage in the House, which took up the education budget and several workforce development bills. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott has the story.
The Alabama State Constitution gives lawmakers one main task to handle: passing the education and general fund budgets. The House started on one of those jobs Tuesday by debating the state's education spending plan.
The budget is increasing by $550 million from $8.8 billion to $9.35 billion, which is an increase of 6.25%. This is the maximum allowed by the secondary cap calculation adopted by the legislature last year. In addition, we've already passed today a $1 billion advancement in technology fund release, and of course the $651 million of supplemental appropriation.
House Bill 145 is approved. More work toward the state's workforce improvements plan also appears before lawmakers. House Bill 346 seeks to help workers by starting a tax credit for housing to help with the cost of living.
So in general, this bill creates a state workforce housing tax credit that complements an existing federal program.
What I have been told by the individuals that have reached out to me, those individuals are finding themselves homeless. And if we don't find way, because people who may have houses available will not accept them, how do we prevent that same type of thing happening to this group of individuals? You talked about the mother who has children and wants to go back to work. But what about those people that are already working, struggling, but living in housing? They get the that voucher for house, but there's no resources, no additional resources available for them.
Well, that is exactly the type of housing we're talking about here, and that we need.
And so you think that this is going to close that gap?
Well,
you believe
it can be a piece of the answer.
House Bill 346 is approved. At the State House, Randy Scott, Capitol Journal.
I'll speak with Chairman Garrett more about the budget later in the show. And that housing tax credit bill was one of several bills the House passed this week intending to remove barriers to the workforce and encourage more Alabamians to pursue available jobs. Also passing was House Bill 358, the child care tax credit from Representative Anthony Daniels. It would incentivize employers to fund child care options for their workers. It would also incentivize child care providers to expand access and improve quality, all to help remove affordable child care as a barrier to entering the workforce. Senate Bill 247, the Workforce Transformation Act. This would consolidate the state's sometimes duplicative workforce departments into one agency with a cabinet-level director. Senate Bill 325, the Alabama Growth Alliance Act. This would establish a public-private partnership focused on the state's long-term economic development efforts. And Senate Bill 253, the Career Pathways Act. This would encourage Alabama students to pursue trades and align instruction to suit their career path. Another week, another update on the gambling issue. The Senate this week agreed to a conference committee with members from both chambers to work out the differences between the vastly different gambling bills passed by the House and by the Senate. Capitol Journal's Jeff Sanders has more.
Trying to make a prediction about the future of gambling in the Alabama legislature is often a gamble in itself.
You know, when we passed it, we passed with 22 votes. And then when we had the question for the conference, we had 19 votes. 2 of those were new. So we lost 5 votes that we got to figure out why we lost those.
Senator Greg Albritton on one of the many challenges that lay ahead for the Gambling Conference Committee. The committee is made up of 3 members from the House and 3 members from the Senate. But with a Senate version that eliminates the expanded casino gambling and sports betting of the House version, finding a path to compromise will be challenging.
As far as the whack-a-mole game, you know, once you move one thing, you lose this and such. The window of opportunity of what each side wants, and by that I mean House and Senate, is very, very small.
But while Albritton sees a tough road ahead for compromise, fellow conference committee member Senator Bobby Singleton appears more optimistic.
And I feel real good about, what could come out. And I think that there's some things that could be worked out. But at the end of the day, we have not sit down and talked in strategy. We have not talked about anything that could be or where it is. I think the only thing we've been doing is looking at what both bills said in comparison to 2 bills and just trying to see what the comparisons are.
There's lots of opportunities to find a path, but to get to that path, we've got to be able to have votes. And right now, I don't see 63 in the House, nor do I see 21 in the Senate.
And if those obstacles weren't enough for lawmakers to resolve the gambling issue, there's one more, and that's the fact that there are only 7 meeting days left for this legislative session. For Capitol Journal, I'm Jeff Sanders.
The Senate this week took up legislation on the issue of unionization. Senate Bill 231 from Senator Arthur Orr would prohibit any economic incentive dollars from going to companies that voluntarily recognize a union without a vote of the workers. Orr said it would not impact current companies who already have a union, but it would serve as a deterrent to those whose workers are considering unionization right now, namely Mercedes and Hyundai. Mercedes workers plan to vote next month.
There's an organization effort. They got enough cards to trigger a vote. The company would forfeit its state incentives if it did not have a private ballot vote on the union organization. It doesn't preclude the organization, doesn't preclude the union. And to me, Senator, it would get the employees to be able to make a decision without influence from the employer, because it could come from the employer saying, don't do that, don't vote for the union, and trying to, supervisors trying to push a non-union vote, and the organizers for the union. It'd keep them at bay somewhat. They can distribute literature, they can do all the campaigning they want.
I've been hearing from some unions is that they don't want to give up that ability to have that negotiation with the company without the vote. And just say that we come to an agreement and we come up and we come to terms and there is no vote and we decide to come with union.
Right.
And so, and I think that they feel that this bill, some of them feel that your bill would take that part of it away from them.
That bill passed and now goes to the House. The Senate also debated the issue of vaccines. Alabama law already allows for religious exemptions on vaccination requirements for public school children. Senate Bill 246 would restrict public health entities from asking prying questions about the nature of religious objections to vaccines. The bill generated plenty of questions itself, especially from Democrats who worried the legislation might adversely impact public health in schools.
People complain about, and not just in my area, it comes from various areas in the state, where sometimes it takes quite a bit of time waiting in the waiting room to get the government official to give you the exemption, but also some more aggressive individuals in the health department interrogating individuals about their religious beliefs.
Because it's nice making them folk feel fine who don't want to do what you're trying to do with, but it ain't right to the people who don't want to catch these diseases neither. See, we worried about these folks, this the words I used growing up, we worried about them folks who yang, who complaining that they don't want to go through this. But we ain't worried about these folks who getting sick.
If you're unvaccinated, you're the one that should be worried about going to school, not the vaccinated, according to your theory. And if you're vaccinated, I mean.
That bill also passed and now goes to the House. The Senate Education Policy Committee this week considered legislation that would allow athletic competition between the Alabama High School Athletic Association and the Alabama Independent Schools Association. As the law currently stands, schools in different associations can't play each other, even if they're in the same town. Senate Bill 82 from Senator Will Barfoot would change that.
This bill, in essence, is what I refer to as an interplay bill. Currently, we have independent schools who are not able to play Alabama High School Athletic Association schools that are right down the road, while in fact those Alabama High School Athletic Association same schools can travel to Mississippi, to Florida, to Georgia, or to Tennessee to play other schools. This is truly a bill to help the children. And it is amazing to me that, that there would be any pushback, because it is an opportunity, again, not a mandate, but rather an opportunity for those children to play other children, K through 12, junior high and high school kids that are most likely in the same community that they go to church with, and give them an opportunity to engage in athletic competitions.
We have no business going in there telling these folks that they gotta do this or do that when they are not a state agency. We don't have them in the budget. We don't do anything like that. So we shouldn't be meddling with that organization. Leave them alone. Leave them alone. They don't do nothing. We can't micromanage other people's business just because we have the power and authority to do something.
The committee vote on that bill was a 3-3-1 stalemate, meaning the bill does not advance. It could come back up, though, and there's also a companion legislation moving in the House. Also moving in the legislature is a bill to adjust Alabama's election qualification deadline so that President Joe Biden doesn't get left off the November ballot. The issue is that the Democratic National Convention won't officially nominate Biden until after Alabama's statutory qualification deadline has passed. But Democrats and Republicans seem to all agree on legislation that would fix the problem, just as they had to do back in 2010 when it was President Donald Trump at risk of being left off the ballot.
I think that is very important. It is, it's highly, impossible for the state of Alabama to lead the president of the United States off. I can see it was just a candidate or something, but the sitting president, and I don't think the state of Alabama want that embarrassment. So both parties has been working together to try to make sure that this happens.
Big news this week for Alabama's coast and all those who visit the Baldwin County beaches. Governor Kay Ivey announced that the Alabama Department of Transportation has agreed to purchase the Foley Beach Express toll bridge in Orange Beach.
That's great to have two bridges going on and off of the island. I still think there are some conversations to have about how they flow exactly. My mayors down there, I think, understand the very unique traffic situation we have with 8 million visitors coming in on and off the island every year, and about 100,000 on the weekends, the high weekends. I mean, we move the equivalent of an Iron Bowl every weekend, and so it's a key area for Alabama tourism and Alabama revenue, or revenue for the state of Alabama. So I'm thrilled to see the investment. We got to make sure everything connects the right way. All the I's are not dotted and T's are not crossed yet, but overall, certainly a good day.
We've reported over the last few years about the effort to boost innovation in Alabama. It's part of a strategic vision to improve the economy and recruit entrepreneurs to the state. You may remember our special Capital Journal episode from the Innovate Alabama November event in Birmingham. This week, it was Innovation Day here in the capital city, as state lawmakers gathered with economic developers and leaders from the tech industry downtown. The event featured national venture capital firm Generator, which is investing in Alabama because of Innovate Alabama and the growing entrepreneurial ecosystem. So far, that investment has raised more than $54 million in capital, created more than 580 jobs, and brought more than 150 companies into the state.
Yeah, I think one of the exciting things that we're seeing through this reception from Generator is how the state is coming together to really celebrate entrepreneurship and innovation. There's so many exciting things as the legislature has really come together to embrace and bring together some programs that allow for people all across this state to be able to have that dream come true of starting an idea and bringing that into a company and running through a program like Generator's programs across the state of Alabama. I think one of the things that's really exciting is to watch how receptive our legislators are to the idea of innovation and entrepreneurship. So as the meetings were happening throughout the day today, the feedback our founders were getting, our program managers were getting, it was just ecstatic about what kind of impact they're seeing already. And we're only just a few years into this great work around innovation and entrepreneurship through Innovate Alabama and the partnership with our House and our Senate here in the state of Alabama.
I am just so excited that, we had so many individuals to show up and support. What this means is we are growing in terms of collaboration and the number of people that are getting involved, people and entities that are getting involved in this innovation space to really help elevate and move Alabama forward. 2 years into this space, the biggest challenge is innovation is such a big word. And so us really identifying what does innovation mean for not only the state, but for Alabama Power. How do we add scope of responsibility around to know that we are effectively adding value where value needs to be had or made? And so, in the 2 years, it has been great work, it has been great learning, but it's a challenge, but it's a good challenge. It's a good challenge that needs to be had, and I've seen so much tremendous growth over the last 2 years in terms of how many people, again, have been involved and engaged in innovation and really focus on the tech ecosystem across the entire state.
Coming up after the break, I'll sit down with House Education Budget Committee Chairman Danny Garrett to talk in detail about the education budget and the workforce bills moving in the legislature. After that, Representative Chris England will join me for a discussion of his criminal justice reform bills and the situation facing Alabama's prisons. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Alabama is home to a diverse and widespread variety of minerals. Chalk, a soft, extremely fine-textured variety of limestone, occurs in the coastal plains section of west central Alabama. Originally formed as the floor of an ancient sea, the chalk can be seen along prominent bluffs on the Tombigbee River. White Bluff is a historic site located in Demopolis, Alabama, which owes its character and natural beauty to the underlying chalk rocks.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is State Representative Danny Garrett, Chairman of the House Education Budget Committee. Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
We've had a busy week.
It's been a very busy week.
Well, it's been a busy session, but specifically on, you chair the Education Budget Committee in the House. The education budget was on the floor this week. This is the biggest budget we've ever seen. It comes with a lot of different bills and a lot of different line items. Talk about just in general how y'all went through this process, because it started in your committee this year, and what it took to get it to the House floor and get it passed almost unanimously.
Well, it's the largest education budget we've ever had. I think it's the 6th consecutive year of increasing or record education budgets. It's $9.3 billion. We allocated $1 billion in advancement technology funds on top of that. and then we appropriated another $651 million on top of that in supplemental appropriation. So altogether, it's a big number. But what's interesting is because of the way we've been budgeting, we've had some very conservative budgeting processes that we put in place. We added a secondary cap last year that limits the budget growth. So we have a calculation now that says that what we can spend based upon revenue that we receive, receipts. But now we have a cap that just limits the budget growth increment per year. So last year the budget could grow 6.5%. This year it can only grow 6.25%. Next year it can only grow 6%. So that steps down to 5.75%, which limits our budget growth. And any receipts we receive over that, there's a waterfall effect of what goes into the rolling reserve budget stabilization fund, what goes into advancement technology, what goes into supplemental, what's available for supplemental, but also before that, the new education savings account that we set up a couple of years ago that the legislature can access apart from proration. So even though we spend a lot of money, and people are wondering, have we lost our minds, we've spent so much money, at the end of the day, when all of this is done, this budget is passed, we will have in the rolling reserve account $794 million. We will have $1.5 billion in the advancement technology fund. We'll have $1 billion in the education savings account fund, and then we'll have in the rainy day account that we can access through borrowing another $647 million. Now we have some plans and ideas for how that goes, but the point is we've not spent all the money we've had coming in from all the COVID federal money that came in. We've responsibly grown the budget. We're able to sustain it, and we're in a good spot with respect to reserves.
I guess the thinking is, yeah, receipts are up right now, economies, revenues are up, but it might not always be that way.
Well, they were up. They're already leveling off and actually are beginning to dip. And we knew that. That was predictable. That's why we've taken some of these measures we've taken.
So you're thinking, because I remember back, what was it, 2013, 2014, I mean, those were really tough budget years, and a lot of people got cut. So you're thinking those reserves, that conservative budgeting, could help out when there is a rainy day.
When there's a rainy day, or as we look at some other long-term initiatives that we want to do to help improve education. We just adopted school choice.
Right.
And we did not hit this education budget. We are allowing for the funding for that begins in a couple of years through a different mechanism, a supplemental appropriation. But eventually, if the school choice programs grow, we'll need to recognize that and understand that. We've also talked about catching up with what other states are doing and changing the funding formula, the way we fund education. Right now we fund basically upon head count. We don't take into account specific needs of the systems.
Right.
And a lot has changed in the last 30 years since we adopted that formula.
I wanted to ask you about that because there was a group that came out this week, kind of different education organizations saying it's time to reform the way we actually do distribute education dollars. Are you a part of that conversation?
Well, not necessarily with that group. Chairman Orr and I have been talking about this since last year, and we've been having more discussions about it and been speaking publicly about it. The way we allocate funding today is pretty much on head count. So you take the pot of education money we have available and you allocate it or distribute it to the systems based on the heads they have. And it's really not the heads they have today, it's what they had 2 years ago, 20 days after Labor Day, sort of a snapshot in time. And what most states have done now is to look at each district and each system and you score that based upon their needs. If you have a district that has a high percentage of special needs students or a high percentage of ESL students, or you're in a high poverty area, you have transportation issues, a variety of different things. The state doesn't fund any of that right now because pretty much we take the money and divide it by head count. So this would be a way to look at those specific needs. In this budget, we did kind of step in that direction and do some targeted funding of some specific programs. Ultimately, though, if you address the education model we're talking about, you would score systems and fund appropriately. You would also not necessarily line item fund everything. So, for example, right now, we not only give you a system money, but we say you have to spend this amount on transportation, or on buses, or this amount on X.
So it's not flexible.
It's not flexible. This would give, within parameters, the ability for systems to take the money they need based upon the way they score, and then have some discretion as to putting that where they need to go. An example, in the supplemental budget this year, the governor had targeted $100 million for school safety. And we removed that earmark, but we increased the A&T money by over $300 million because some systems don't need to take that money and spend it directly on security. Maybe they've had their needs met. Other systems need that. So rather than just tell a system, here's money, you have to spend it this way, you give some flexibility. It's a complicated process. It's got a lot of work to do, but there are certainly support for it among many constituents, many education groups. And again, we're one of 6 states who have not jumped on that train. And so we're looking to maybe really seriously study that and hopefully come up with something in the near future. But that will require some funding to transition to something like that.
Yeah, it's never going to be just easy.
Right.
It's not seamless transition. I know Tennessee did something similar a couple of years ago. So that's something to follow in the off season.
Right.
Specifically on these efforts that the legislature has championed, you specifically, Literacy Act, Numeracy Act. I keep hearing every time people talk, whether it was in committee or on the floor, about targeted funding to make sure these laws that y'all passed are being funded properly and that they're working properly. Are you comfortable with the funding that these are for literacy and numeracy?
Well, we're fully funding both of those acts. Now, numeracy is newer than literacy. Literacy has been around and had some delays because of COVID. But this is the year that we will actually have the first time that we retain students in 3rd grade who have not met those standards. And I hear that it could be as much as 25% of 3rd graders across the state could be retained. That will be a shock, but I think people should be prepared for that. And there will be some remediation programs through the summer to maybe catch people up, but it's going to be a big number, I think. So to that point, we are continuing to fund that and seeing some improvements as in the pre-K and as you move on up toward 3rd grade. But also we did put a pot of money in a line item this year for to start funding reading initiatives beyond 3rd grade for struggling readers beyond 3rd grade.
Okay.
So I think you get the 3rd grade, which is a snapshot, but then we've got to continue on, and those children are going to continue to need support and focus as we move forward. So that's an example of something we did in the budget this time. But yeah, I think that we have high expectations for all those programs. We're targeted funding those programs, fully funding those programs, and we're hopeful the results will pan out.
Yeah, everybody's going to be paying attention. You're right. But we haven't seen bills this year to delay further the retention thing. So yeah, it may be a wake up call come this summer.
Right.
As I mentioned, it was almost unanimous. You had one no vote from the newest member of the legislature, Marilyn Lands. She said she voted no because of the cuts to the library service, 18%, because most agencies and most line items got increases or level funded. What was the reason for that, the cut to libraries?
Well, I think if you look at this budget line by line and you go through it, you will see that what the priorities of the legislature are. I think there are a lot of things that we really support, that we really advocate, and we want to support those programs. There are other areas that we're maybe not as we're concerned about some things, and I think that we're a collective body, so I think the funding kind of reflects that. With respect to the library service, we didn't cut what goes into the the libraries, the local libraries, but we did require that they follow and adopt the governor's proposed regulations, which are very common sense regulations, just adding to what they already have to do. The idea that the local libraries would have a policy segregating children's material for children based on inappropriate topics and age categories. And also, if they were going to be a member of the American Library Association, that they would have a public meeting and let their patrons understand and know that they're adopting a policy to formally affiliate with that group. Now, why is that an issue for the governor and for us? Because the American Library Association elected last year a person who's an avowed Marxist. And we've seen a lot of things and directives and coming down through that organization that have been troubling. They've landed up in our local libraries. I think they've not been embraced by intentionally, it's just that's happened. But it's a wake-up call. We began to have discussions with the library service a year ago, back in the summer, about our concerns about that and trying to get movement on addressing the concerns of the legislature, which represent our constituents. And they're the ones paying the taxes and funding the libraries. And we were disappointed as where the public library service landed. They never presented a budget to me, never came to our budget hearings. So our deal was, well, you're not entitled to funding just because you exist. So what we did was we did cut their operating budget, but we redirected that money. $250,000 of that cut went to the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, which the governor funded, and that puts books every month into the homes of underprivileged children. The other $500,000 went into a reading program called Better Basics, which does reading intervention and reading coaching to underprivileged children, and primarily through Central Alabama. So that operating budget money did go elsewhere, but it went to some very worthy programs. The money that went to the public libraries was not disturbed. All they have to do is comply with the governor's order, which basically says each local board sets a policy, and the policies will be different by district. But you have to have a policy to segregate that material for children, because that's been a problem and an issue. And then you have to basically say, if you're going to be affiliated with this national organization that has some questionable ideas, that you have to at least let your local folks know you're doing that. I mean, we had people in the legislature who wanted to do a lot more than what we did, but I think we sent the message, and we're not anti. I mean, the last several years since I've been budget chair, I've increased the APL's budget every year. They really stepped up during COVID, and I think did a great job opening the libraries and making it available for kids who are out of school and need internet access and things like that. But we're at a point right now where I think it's important that the legislature appropriates the money, and so as we have concerns, I think we need to have those heard. And again, we fully support what their mission is. We fully support that organization, but this year we just chose to go in a different direction.
I want to ask you about this bill you and Senator Orr are working on, Teachers' Bill of Rights. I was listening in committee. Is that the right way to put it?
Right. Well, people are calling it that, the Teachers' Bill of Rights bill. Yeah.
Well, the way I sort of was listening in committee, the way it sort of rung with me was basically if you've got a disruptive student, you're allowed to expel them from the classroom kind of situation. Is that a right reading of it?
So really right now what happens, we all know that teachers are doing a lot more than they signed up for. We have all sorts of issues and federal mandates and just a lot of things that require them to do a lot more than just teach. And it's grueling, it's grinding, it's affecting people who want to come into the profession, it's affecting the people who want to stay in the profession. And what we're finding all too often is because of the administrations and school boards and superintendents, rightly so in some cases, are concerned about litigation if they take action. So you have students in the classroom that are very disruptive. They may be threatening to the teacher, threatening to other students. It's mind-boggling the number of cases that go on. And all too often, what happens is the answer is, well, let the kid cool down and then take him back. And this happens. And not only is it abusive, there's situations that's abusive to the teacher and to other students, but it disrupts the learning for the other students. And so at the end of the day, what this bill is all about is that a teacher should not have to endure that just as part of an accepted normal routine. So it sets forth a policy so that you can't just, kick a child out of the classroom for a not valid reason. But it sets forth a process for that if you have a child that's disruptive and repeatedly and intentionally doing certain things, they would be, sent to the principal, basically, like it was in the old school.
That's the way it was when I was coming up.
And then what has happened, they need to, rather than just say, let them cool down and send them back, they need to deal with the issue. Mm-hmm. So I think the school boards and superintendents have got to step up and be proactive rather than reactive on this issue. And we've had a lot of comments from them, and we've incorporated a lot of their comments into the bill because we don't want to make it something that's not ridiculous, but it's just not, it's not reasonable to expect teachers to have to deal with what they have to deal with in the classrooms and just say that's part of your job. It's not.
Is this also, partly stemming from COVID though? The Alabama didn't have as long as school closures as other states did, but we still had some. Students were removed from school settings for a while. And is this also kind of a, picture of the mental health situation in our state? Maybe we need some more focus in classrooms for mental health support for students.
Well, and we've been doing it in the budget, and that's the point. We want to provide that mental health support, but right now we're asking teachers to do all of that. You've got to be mental health, you've got to be disciplined, you've got to teach, you've got to do paperwork, you've got to be,
it's a lot to ask.
It's just a lot to ask, and nobody wants to sign up for that. And so, or stay in that profession. So it's really more of a common sense, what's reasonable, and we're trying to get to a reasonable point. I think we can, because I think everybody agrees with it. Even yesterday at the public hearing, those that spoke in opposition to this bill acknowledge the problem and understand something more needs to be done. I think it's more easily solvable than people want to think. But right now, people are just so afraid of lawsuits or afraid of getting pushback. And, you know, at some point, if we want to have public education and continue to have people in the classroom teaching, we've got to do something. So in this budget, we provided, you know, auxiliary teachers for a number of things. We provided a lot of support. Again, this goes back to that special needs situation I mentioned too earlier. When you look at how you fund a system, some systems, this is more of an issue than others, but it's really an issue throughout the state in all issues. You can take poor systems, affluent systems, this behavioral issue, and the teachers need more support.
Well, we don't have much time, but I wanted to talk about workforce because that's the other big thing moving this week. You've got legislation, a big realignment of the state's workforce development and really career pathways and things like that. Talk about workforce and why this has been such a priority and really what your realignment bill would do.
So the labor participation rate in Alabama is the lowest in the country. That means of the number of people who are out of work, who are not looking for work, we have more than anybody percentage-wise. And that's limiting our ability to grow the economy, grow jobs and whatnot. So we're in this workforce package addressing a lot of the reasons for why that's happening, trying to get that, improve that number. We're at 57% labor participation, national average is 62%. If we move it 1%, it's a tremendous impact. So all these bills are focused on that, improving labor participation. Unemployment rate's already very, very low, but that's a function of people who are out of work who are looking for work, and there's just not very many of those. A lot more people out of work. And why are they not looking for work? A lot of it is because if they go back to work, they lose a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
The benefits cliff issue. So we've tried to address that. That's through the child care and housing credits that we're looking at. A number of other things, but my workforce alignment, the best way I could, since we're kind of a football state, if you can imagine having a football team and you've got 10 different offensive coordinators calling plays, there's a lot of confusion. You need somebody calling the play, right? So right now we have a lot of worthy workforce initiatives all around the state, but they're in silos, they're not coordinated. We don't have a statewide comprehensive workforce plan. In a lot of cases, these workforce initiatives are not, have had no discussions, or really not connected with the business community who's doing the hiring. So we need to be having these initiatives that align with the needs of the employers. So what this does with the restructuring, set up a cabinet position, Secretary of Workforce. We consolidate some of the Commerce and Labor Department initiatives together, but all the workforce comes under one position. There's a structure in place where we'll have where from the bottom up, we will develop these comprehensive statewide workforce plans. But in the future, whereas as a budget chair, when everybody comes to me and says, I have this project I want for workforce development, the first question I will ask is, are you part of the plan? And that's what we have to do, is make sure we're all swimming the right direction. Because a lot of the jobs we're training for, or should be training for, don't even exist today. And so if what we're doing is kind of looking back, we're not going to grow that participation deal. So our deal just basically consolidates a lot of these initiatives, make sure we have one person kind of being the quarterback, but a lot of checks and balances throughout that system, and provide more transparency. And we'll make sure we're spending our dollars wisely as well.
Interesting. We'll try to avoid calling it a czar, right?
We will not do that.
Mr. Chairman, we're out of time, but thank you for your time, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page. You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is State Representative Chris England from Tuscaloosa. Mr. England, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, you've had a lot of legislation moving around this last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I wouldn't exactly say moving.
Well, some of it is, some of it was. And I wanted to start, and before we get to the judiciary stuff, I wanted to start out with SSUT, Simplified Seller's Use Tax, basically the online sales tax. And you had a bill adjusting this, increasing it in some ways, got through committee, got to the House floor, but then ran into kind of a brick wall there. talk about what this, because it's kind of complicated. Talk about what's behind this bill and what it would have done.
Well, years ago, we created the Simplified Seller Use Tax, the SSUT, because online sellers, marketplace facilitators were not required to collect a tax on the sales, on online sales. So in order to encourage online retailers, marketplace facilitators to collect a tax, we put it at 8%, which was lower than the prevailing rate across the state in different locations. Well, fast forward a couple of years, Supreme Court issues a decision, a Wayfair decision that allows us to now assess a use tax on those transactions. Unfortunately though, as you know, when you got a more convenient way to get your services or goods or whatever, and it's at a lower cost, well, more people are going to order stuff online. So now we have a disparity that's developed between brick and mortar local stores and also online sellers because it's a lower tax rate. And also in the SSUT, we created another pathway. So like, whereas your traditional sales tax would go into the education trust fund, this use tax primarily goes to the general fund. So as we collect it at a lower rate across the state, the biggest losers are your local brick and mortar because less people go to those stores, but also education. And across the state, there are probably, I think, 15 total city councils and county commissions that actually share in the proceeds of this SSUT, which, by the way, that probably grows about 20% every fiscal year. But there are only about 15 that share that money with local schools. So schools are losing out, brick and mortar stores are losing out, and it's really to the benefit of people who really don't live here. Like out-of-state marketplace facilitators like Amazon get a break while your local businesses in your cities and counties, they suffer the disparity because it's a higher tax rate. And guess what? More people shop online and they go in stores now.
So this would have fixed it, but was it just the fact that it's a tax increase that sort of led to it being carried over?
I think that's part of it, but I also think that the bill itself would have increased the tax rate to about 9.33%, which is the average across the state. But that
like here in Montgomery, I think it's 10.
Yeah, 10.
Yeah.
As a result, the new money would have had a different distribution formula. Some would have gone to the Big 10, which are over 50,000 people population-wise. Some would have gone to less than 50,000. Counties would have gotten about 20% and, 15%, and the county schools would have got about 20. And I think it wasn't as much of the tax increase that killed it or slowed it down to possibly killing it, to just the distribution formula and people wanting more of the new money. But ultimately, by killing the bill, you're not getting anything. And for another year, local businesses will suffer. You'll have less money for education, and the disparity between those who have low millage rates versus those who have high millage rates will continue to grow. And I don't think it translates very well, because people will see that we pass a record education budget, and it's like $8-9 billion or something. And they'll think, well, the schools must be flush with money, but it doesn't translate that way. Because inflation, the cost on the ground increase, but the money they get never does.
On the local level.
On the local level. So, and as you can see, we're voting down property tax increases all across the state. It's not a popular thing. But that money goes to education. So imagine now you are probably dealing with, 2020 money with 2024 costs, So like, local school boards are picking up gas, transportation costs for student resource officers, costs for nurses and counselors are all coming out of local money that doesn't come from the state. We're responsible for it. So this was just another pathway to try to create funding, a perpetual funding source for local schools.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw it on the calendar. I thought, well, there must be some agreement here, and then it got carried over. So
yeah, we thought that the night before when we got there, and everything changed in the morning. So
interesting. Well, we'll see if some kind of compromise comes up. let's go to your judiciary bills.
Yeah.
You got one through Judiciary Committee yesterday. It has to do with elderly or seriously ill inmates and a pathway to parole review for that. Got through. It had some amendments, but it got through. Talk about what this bill does.
Well, it's compassionate parole, and as our current parole board continues their state of dysfunction with just really poor leadership, our population continues to not only increase but age. Obviously, the older you get, the more it's going to cost to care for you. And quite frankly, we are trying to find different ways legislatively. If you look a couple of years ago when we had mandatory release and so forth, we're trying to find different ways to work around just how ineffective the parole board has been since 2019. And I know people talk about this like it's a soft on crime sort of thing, and it's not. It's really not. It's trying to find a reasonable way to manage a prison population so we can get the most effective use of the resources we have. And quite honestly, if the parole board continues to function the way that they do or currently are, there's no way we could build a prison large enough to incarcerate everyone. There's no way we can generate enough money to care for the folks that are in our custody. I mean, we've already got $1 billion prison with no plans or no money to build another one. And we're going to close several as a result because some of them should be condemned. But we also have just recently signed $1 billion healthcare contract. That's unsustainable. And by the way, we create more crimes every session. We incarcerate more people. So if the parole board becomes that choke point where no one gets out, even those that are no longer a threat to public safety, or too sick to be a threat to public safety, and all we're doing now is just basically running an old folks home for people to, eventually pass away in our custody, you can't explain to me that that's an effective use of our resources. And by the way, if we're talking about public safety, and everybody tells you that the folks who've been there the longest are the biggest threats, well, over 90% of the people who are incarcerated get out at some point. Do you think it's about public safety if you claim that you're afraid of these folks, but you make them serve their entire sentence, which means they get out with no supervision at all, or you release them a year or so earlier before they hit end of sentence
with
supervision and help. So if they reoffend, they can actually go back, or they can have somebody that can help them do things like get ID, get a job, and so forth. That's what public safety is about, not holding everybody to the end of their sentence so they get out with no supervision. It just doesn't make any sense. And again, if our parole board keeps functioning this way, it's setting us up to lose several lawsuits in federal court, but it's also making us less safe.
Well, yeah, I remember Commissioner Ham talking. He used the analogy of a bathtub. He's like, the correction system is a bathtub. We don't turn the faucet on. We don't take the plug out. We just have to manage what is in the bathtub.
But you also got to think though. They are charged with corrections, right? Rehabilitating people. And they actually classify people based upon their assessment and send some of these folks out every day, unsupervised, for hours at a time to go work and come back. Now, either they don't know what they're doing, or the Pardons and Parole Board believes that they are the worst at their jobs.
Well, so let's talk about that because I hear what you're saying. And it tends to make a lot of sense in just knowing the issue. But at the end of the day, it comes down to politics, right? Every vote that's taken in this building comes down to politics. It is just tough for a lot of members of the legislature, members of Congress, you can go all down the line, to take any kind of position that is deemed, like you said, soft on crime. We got to be tough on crime. That's why more crimes are created every year. And it's just difficult to pass anything that would seem, as tough on crime because they're going to get a primary opponent. They're going to get somebody to run against them. So how does this end? Play the tape through to the end. How does persuasion on reasonable public policy happen, understanding that there's a political incentive to always be the tough on crime candidate?
Oh, the message, facing that backdrop as you've mentioned, the message has evolved. Because on one hand, our system is unconstitutionally according to the Department of Justice, inhumane and overcrowded and under-resourced, right? So we want the stories that you hear about how awful the conditions are within our prison system to hopefully morally motivate us, right? But that's just one component of it. The other part of it is we just don't have enough money. So I can be as tough on crime as I claim to be, or want you to believe that I am, but also in the same sense sacrifice public safety, because eventually just nowhere for these folks to go. So hopefully what prevails, if humanity doesn't move us to take care of the charges that we've been given by taking people into custody and treating them as humans first, the other part of this is it's not fiscally responsible for us to continue to operate the way that we are, because we literally cannot afford it. Our two largest expenditures in our general fund are Medicaid and prisons. That's not a coincidence. It's also not a coincidence that it's costing us $1 billion to care for these folks. Meanwhile, our parole board is giving us a population that's growing in size, in age, and in cost. It's unsustainable. So hopefully what prevails is just basic common sense, that we can tell you we're tough on crime all day long, but you should prefer us to be smart on crime so we can get the most use out of the resources we have and maintain public safety at the same time. It's possible. Other people do it all across the country, but somehow we just haven't crossed that threshold yet.
What about the other side of that coin, though? I mean, a lot of the reason for this pardons and parole situation right now was that there was a parolee that committed some murders.
Yeah.
I guess that was back in 2018, 2019-ish. That really changed the game, because this is a huge story. This person obviously was a threat and all this, and so that really changed the game. So talk about that when members of the legislature, the attorney general, whomever, pardons and paroles, say, no, we don't need to let violent people that they're in jail for a reason. We don't need to do things that make it easier for them to get out of jail. How do you answer that criticism?
Because our overpopulated jails are actually keeping more violent offenders out rather than in, because we have to do things so short of long-term incarceration, because there's not a place to put a lot of these folks. So when you actually start from the top and say our prisons are overcrowded, the effect of that trickles down to how we plead cases, what we do when people are out on bond, and so forth, because we have to make choices about who goes in and who doesn't. Those become practical choices based on space, not on need. And you can't tell me that if, as a prosecutor, I'm making choices based on resources and space, where does public safety enter into that thought process? But the other part of that is a large percentage of our prison population now are convicted of violent offenses, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're violent offenders, which means when we go before the parole board and you got somebody that's retrying a case from something that happened 15 to 20 years ago, they just pretty much ignore everything that they've done while they're incarcerated to better themselves, so when they get out, they don't reoffend. And can you imagine being the Department of Corrections Commissioner, managing a population that is told no matter what you do while you're incarcerated, get degrees, behave yourself, become one of the most trusted members, to the point where we let you go every day and come back. When you go before the parole board, they tell you no.
It should be an incentive to do those things.
And it's not. And the amazing thing is, one of the horrible crime that motivated all this, that person was of a medium risk assessment. Do you know that currently under the board, the few people that get out, there are more people under medium risk assessments that get out than people who are low risk assessments, which is also a subject of a lawsuit that's currently pending in front of our federal court about the way we use prison labor, because there are so many people who are considered to be low risk to the point that they leave every day and go work, but when they go before the parole board, they're told they can't be released because they're a threat to public safety. So again, you don't want us to be tough on crime. You want us to be smart on crime. Because when we're smart on crime, we get a better use of our resources, and we start incarcerating people that are dangerous versus the people that we're just mad at.
Interesting. Well, look, that was a great conversation. I appreciate your perspective on this. Obviously, a lot more to talk about as the session goes on.
Yeah.
Your bill's moving, but again, appreciate your time, and we'll have you back on to follow up.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Tuscaloosa served as the second capital of Alabama from 1826 to 1846 when the capital moved to Montgomery. The Greek Revival and Federal-styled Capitol building was leased to Alabama Central Female College for use as a concert hall and classrooms until it was destroyed by fire in 1923. The architectural influence of the structure is reflected in many of the buildings on the University of Alabama campus, and the ruins are a city park.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with our nightly coverage of the Alabama Legislature. That's 10:30 Monday through Thursday, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.